Did you know that this year, the Xbox 360 is gonna turn 16 years old? That's right, the 360 has become the retro system for a lot of newer gamers who are getting their PlayStation 5 and their Xbox Series X systems. But I still have a lot of fond memories for the Xbox 360, picking it up for the first time back in 2005 and playing Perfect Dark Zero. It was a simpler time back then, but now it's a lot harder to find Xbox 360 systems. GameStop just stopped carrying it completely, and now you pretty much have to go online, places like eBay, and cross your fingers and hope that the system is gonna work when it gets to you, and then finding a good working controller for the Xbox 360 that's not some third-party junk knockoff controller is very difficult as well. But I thought today I would talk a bit about the system as we go through and fix one that I did buy off of eBay that has some issues with it, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through and get it up and running. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So the system just came in yesterday, and I popped it open just to make sure there was a 360 in there, and there is just an obscene amount of bubble wrap, which, I mean, it's better than no bubble wrap, so that's good at least for the packaging. And the idea here, at least with this system, according to the description, there's an issue with the disk drive. So from what it said, the door wasn't opening correctly, and this is an issue that the 360 does have. And I know we talk a lot about the red ring. That's like a major problem for the 360, but there are also a lot of other issues with the system that had it obviously releasing over 80 million consoles, but does have me a bit concerned that we're gonna be going through those 80 million systems very, very quickly, to where the Xbox 360 could actually become a rare system years and years down the road. Now, I am specifically talking about this older white model. The newer Slims they're much more durable. They don't have as many issues as what we see with these systems here. Now, these did improve over time from the original release in 2005 and early 2006 until this one, which this appears to be one from late 2008. It does have HDMI on the back here. So this one in particular is less prone to the red ring. Doesn't mean it's immune to the red ring, because it would still get it just based on the way that they have it set up internally, but certainly a much better pickup than the original system. Now, for any of you young gamers who maybe didn't have this Xbox 360, we can do a quick tour around it. We have 2 memory card slots. Yeah, we did have memory cards when the Xbox 360 first came out. Eventually they transitioned over to having you use like a USB stick, and it would format that into a memory card, but we had 512 and I think 256 megabyte memory cards. We mostly use those for taking our Xbox Live profiles back and forth to our friend's house. We also had a little IR receiver here because you would get one of those media remotes. Now it all syncs up through Bluetooth and all of this. But again, we had our own little remote that we could use when we're watching DVDs or any of that. Our power button here that does have the 4 different quadrants all the way around that would give you flashing red lights, and people would be absolutely terrified if they would see anything like that. Even though when the system first came out, you would get a cluster of 4 red lights if you didn't have your AV cables plugged in all the way. So I do wonder how many of these systems got sent back thinking they had the red lights, but really it was just because they didn't have all their cables plugged in right. On the top here is where you would have your hard drive, and it was funny because when the system first came out, we had a 20 gigabyte hard drive and it was $100. Yeah, 20 gigabyte hard drive, $100. Now, eventually they went up to like 60 gigabyte, 120 gigabyte with the Elite that was released. And I think they had a 250 gigabyte hard drive for this model, although there were also a lot of third-party unofficial hard drives that would come out. So again, I'm not 100% sure if those were actually official at the time. And then if we flip it over back here, we have several ports we can take a look at. We do have another USB port here. We have Ethernet, HDMI, and our large AV port here that also supported component out. And then we have our power plug here, and the power supply was external from the system. We had that big brick. It wasn't until we got things like the Xbox One S and the One X where the power supply was put back into the system. The original Xbox did have the power supply inside. They took it out for the 360 and then put it back later on with the Xbox One revision. All right, now let's go ahead and turn it on, and we'll see if it does boot up and we get something on screen here. And we'll also take a look at the disk drive just to see if that is the issue. Okay, so we do have at least it posting, which is good. You can hear the fans are pretty loud. That was the big thing with the 360, is it was a pretty noisy system, so it is posting fine. I do hear the fan actually a bit louder than even I would expect for a 360, so we're also gonna, I guess, clean up inside of the system a bit here. A lot of times you would get some blockage in the front when it came to the heat sinks, as it would pull air through and get little dust bunnies in there. As for the disk drive, it is stuck. I press the eject button and it just kind of sticks there, doesn't pop out. It's still trying to open. Hit it again and it closes fine. So I guess we'll get it apart here and see what we can do to make this system read again and not be so loud. Now, the good thing about the Xbox 360 is it's not like a very difficult system to take apart if you want to do some maintenance to it. Now, I don't recommend necessarily for everyone to go down to the chip itself, like the CPU or the GPU, and mess around with that. But if you're just trying to do basic cleaning and maybe even work on the disk drive, there's not a lot that has to come apart to get there. So the faceplate itself pops off. Then at the top, you have these two gray spots, one on the bottom, one on the top here. And these come off based on tabs that are on either side, which you just kind of push in through these holes. And you can sort of see it if you look through. And this will just sort of lift right off, at which point we can kind of clamshell this thing open. Now, as I'm opening this up on the front, I did notice that the warranty seal right here has already been cut. So that tells me that it's at least been open to this point, and I guess we'll find out if anything weird's been done inside this one. Now, the most popular thing to do to these systems is to remove the heat sinks and the X clamps and change out the thermal compound, then put screws and washers in them. I don't necessarily think that's the best idea because you will bend and flex the board badly with different screws and washers. The X clamps, they're generally fine. It's more or less the way it was set up with the board that bends and flexes when it's inside of this metal cage here, and just the cheap materials that were used to get it out in time for that launch in holiday of 2005. But the nice thing here is it doesn't look like any real tampering's going on beyond this point, as I still have all 8 of these smaller black screws here, which tells me the X clamps are still intact. And what we have to do in order to get down to where we have the disk drive and a good look at the heatsink is just remove these longer screws. And they're different colored even. See, like these are kind of like a yellowish gold sort of. You want to go around and grab these silver screws that are a bit longer, and we'll then be able to take the lid off. So I counted 6 of those longer screws. Now we can get the top off here, and we can take a look. Yeah, it does look like we have some dust right in here. There's probably some underneath of our, let's see, our disk drive here. Good, like I said, good news. It doesn't look like any tampering's been done, as we even still have this kind of aluminum strip here still intact. That just, I guess, was to cut down on overall vibration, or who knows, maybe it was something that Microsoft put there just to see if someone had been tampering with the disk drive when it was sent in, because it was very popular to modify the disk drive in these different systems. But I'm expecting to probably see some dust bunnies under here as well. Yeah, we have some very minor blockage. It's more or less, I would say, the CPU side where we can see some clogging here. It's not the worst I've seen, but it can still affect overall airflow and make that fan kind of ramp up a bit. So I popped the disk drive out here, and I do want to also remove the fan shroud. There's a little tab right back here that just pops it out. And at this time, we can just kind of clean out this fan shroud ourselves under the sink, just with a paper towel, just clean that up really well. And then we can just take some compressed air, or even technically a vacuum if you want to, just kind of go through this very lightly. Just kind of clean out this heatsink specifically on the CPU, as that tends to be the one that ramps up the fan heavily. Okay, so you can see I cleared out the dust really well. You can even see through there if you just kind of hold it at the right angle. The idea is to mostly just loosen up the dust as much as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make it so it's easy for the fan even to kind of pull any remaining dust back through it, as it will, even if this is perfect, still get kind of loud and pull air out pretty quickly. But this looks pretty good now, so we can turn our attention to the disk drive. Now, the disk drive does have a lot of moving parts inside to make this work, where the tray itself will open, close, pop the disk up, kind of attach with a magnet, spin, read with the laser, and it can be kind of intimidating for people when they do get the lid off to go much further. But the good news here is it's actually pretty easy to fix the issue that I'm seeing with this one, which is where the tray itself gets stuck. And it's a very common issue with these different systems. This one I believe is a BenQ drive. It was pretty common with that, but for the most part, it's the same fix across the board for any of these Xbox 360 drives. So on the bottom here, there's just 4 Phillips head screws. The lid pops off and you can immediately see our spindle and our laser. Now these work together along with a little arm in here that moves the laser so that it can read the DVD or the game that you put inside. Now we'll find out here in a minute if all of this still works, but first we need to get the drive itself open because it is in the locked position. Now the way this works is when the system is told to open the drive, it does have a motor that then kicks everything in motion with gears and all this, but all we need to do is right here, there's this little arm, and we just need to kind of move that to the side. It'll drop down this deck right here, and it'll actually free the drive. Now, if you want to go ahead and close it up, you can, and it'll kick it all back into place, but we can see all the gears down here along with this band. Now, this rubber band, believe it or not, is the reason that this is not opening. And it sounds weird, but simply taking this band and just washing it will most likely fix the issue we're running into. And that's just mostly because of wear and tear, and it just being dirty can actually cause it to stick. And the motor in here isn't exactly very strong in the first place, so if there's any real resistance from something as basic as a rubber band inside of the 360, yeah, it'll stop the drive from opening. So I just recommend taking this, going to like a sink and running water with some hand soap and literally just wash your hands with the rubber band in there and then dry it out and we'll drop it right back in. And there we have it. After some warm water and basic hand soap, the band is nice and clean. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of wipe this down a little bit around the edges and sort of where the band is gonna be going. Just get any dust or dirt that's obvious and loose. And then we're gonna replace the band here and see if it opens. Okay, so we have the drive reinstalled, all plugged back in. I just wanna see if it now kicks the door open as it wasn't before. So if we hit that, yep, it does open right up, which is good. I did grab Halo 3, so we're gonna find out if this does read, hopefully it does. And I can already hear the fan kicking back up, so unfortunately that means we're probably gonna have to remove the heat sinks and look underneath to see if we have an issue when it comes to the compound and see if there's good contact there or not. I'm gonna say probably not, but it does sound like it's reading, so that's good news there. Awesome. Yeah, okay, so it's starting up. So the disk drive itself with the door did appear to be an issue with it just being dirty, but I can hear the fan starting to really spin up right now as the game starts. Might be able to hear it. So from what I can tell, we're probably, yeah, because heatsink's not even that hot. So it's just having a hard time pulling heat off of the chip to the heatsink and then out of the back here. So let's go ahead, we're gonna break this back down and take a look at the chips. Okay, so with all the screws removed on the opposite side, this does just kind of lift up out of here and we can see our X clamps just completely fine. They have not been tampered with at all, which again is a good thing here. And we also, oh, they do have kind of like the little thermal sponges on the other side for the RAM. Sometimes you get these, sometimes you don't. It is nice to have them though, just to be able to pass off any of the heat here. As much heat as we can get away from this board, the better. Now when it comes to removing X clamps, it's pretty easy. You just want to go around one corner at a time with some pretty thin pliers at the top there. You want to be careful so you don't want to hit the board at all, but you just kind of get it under one side here, sort of test it a bit, and just a quick little turn. You don't have to do a lot, and it should pop right off of it. So I'm just going to go around, do each side here, and then they'll just kind of fall off. Okay, once you have the X clamps off of there, these should just pop right out. And I mean, we do have some pretty dry compound, and that's always been the biggest issue with the Xbox 360 is, I don't know, just the compound they use is just so cheap. And we have even like some spots here that aren't being covered at all. So most likely there just wasn't good contact and the chips themselves were starting to get pretty hot, especially here on the CPU side. Like that whole middle part looks like it was just completely dried out. Now all that's left to do is just clear off the old compound, put some new compound on, and then we can put it all back together. I just recommend using 91% isopropyl alcohol. You just kind of put that on a Q-tip and just carefully work around until it's cleared off. So I cleaned both sides up well enough, I think. Also cleaned off the bottoms of the heat sinks. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a little bit of this Thermaltake TG7. I've used this a few times, but Should be good enough for the Xbox 360. That's all we need there. Go ahead and drop the heat sinks back on and reattach the X-clamps. Reattaching the X-clamps is actually pretty easy. If you just have two sides on, it is designed to essentially click in. So we have these two sides on here, just like that, right? The middle will press down, and then you kind of come around here, you line it up, and you have some pressure on the heatsink on the other side. You push down there, and it'll grab it and click in. Do the same thing there, and you have your heat sinks all attached using those X-clamps. All right, we have it reinstalled back in the metal cage. We just have to put the fan shroud back on. We have our button board, the disk drive, and we can test it again to see how the fan sounds. And when it went into Halo before, the fan just like tried to take off completely. So we'll see if we get into the game if it tries to do the same thing. It should now, because we replaced the compound, and heat transfer should be as good as it can be for an Xbox 360. Like I said, these older Xbox 360 systems weren't the greatest at managing heat. So we're doing the best what we can with what we have to work with here. So starting up now though, the fan, it's pretty good. It's not overtaking the sound of the disk drive, that's a step up. The heatsink is getting pretty warm, which is a good thing. Like I said, you want to have the heat transfer from the chip to the heatsink. Let's jump into the game and see how it does. So I just started up a custom game in Valhalla because, I mean, long live Blood Gulch, obviously. And I just mostly wanted to load up the map, move around a bit, see if I can get the fan to speed up at all, really a bit even. And just a little bit, like a normal ramp up that we'd have for the Xbox 360 when it comes to the fan curve. Seems significantly better than what we were dealing with before, and a lot of that did come down to the pretty old dry compound that was trying to transfer heat from the chips up to the heat sinks. So going back to the Xbox 360 and it being, I guess, rare over time, I think it's possible that it could get to that point, specifically these older models that are used a lot in like the soft mod and hacking community, because there have been some really cool things done with these Xbox 360 systems. And the 360 in general still has games that are not supported on the Xbox Series systems or the Xbox One, which are much easier to find now, and then playing the 360 games through backwards compatibility have a lot of benefits. We've seen the frame rates increased heavily, we've seen resolution, even extra effects. But the fact that there are still quite a few games just kind of left on the Xbox 360 does still at least make it a relevant system. Now, the fact that GameStop doesn't sell these anymore does make it harder to find, I guess, ones that you're more confident in buying. I mean, GameStop was selling some pretty bad refurbished systems, but you could at least take it back and say, hey, this thing is broken. A lot of people who buy these systems through eBay and then it's like $20, $30 just to ship it out are less prone to then go through the whole return process, because it might end up costing you more to get it back to them than what you even paid on the system. At least that's what it used to be for the 360. See, I'm starting to notice that good working Xbox 360 systems are starting to go up in price a bit. Now, if you get it complete with everything, including an authentic controller, it'll probably cost you over $100. See, the controllers themselves are becoming exceptionally rare, actually, like authentic ones. There are some third-party knockoff controllers that look the same going around, and they are not the same. They don't feel correct when you actually get them in your hands, but they look very good in the pictures that are taken or the advertisements. So you want to be careful with that one. But wired 360 controllers are becoming very popular because they are used on PC as well. And I know the Xbox One or the Series controllers work fine with Windows, but I don't know, something about the 360 controller, I mean, just really works well. I mean, for some people, that's their favorite controller, just like ever, is that Xbox 360 one. And I mean, I can see why. It's certainly an evolution of the Xbox original S-type controller, and Microsoft took a lot of what they learned from there and moved it over to the 360. But I do like the Xbox Series controller as well. I kind of feel like that's an evolution even from the 360 controller. Now, if you do get lucky and pick up one of these Xbox 360 systems that has an issue like this, where the disk drive maybe is sticking a bit, or you do have to change the compound, which is a bit more work and can bring some risk into the whole thing when you got to get down to the motherboard, you can get these at decent prices. I mean, you can find some where the shipping is more than the console itself, but still, I understand there is that overall risk of the red ring, and generally, I recommend getting one of the slim Xbox 360 systems. I mean, Microsoft did a great job of basically eliminating a lot of what caused the red ring when they went up to that model. But like I said, I know there's also a lot of nostalgia for these systems, and there's still that entire hacking scene around it. Although the Xbox 360 Slim, that has been hacked pretty well also. So, I mean, you can kind of go either way with it. Just be careful when you do buy these, and look into it as much as you can, whether it's talking to the seller, seeing if they've done work to it, or if there's anything they're not necessarily saying in the listing. Okay, now with all that done, the ultimate test. Will the Xbox 360 open when it's standing up? That was a serious issue. Even if you did all that work to it, sometimes the disk drive just wouldn't open when you had it in its vertical orientation, and it does open just fine there. So what you saw today, I guess, was a complete refurbishment from start to finish, fixing up the disk drive, as well as changing the compound on the CPU and the GPU. But who knows, the red ring could be right around the corner for this Xbox 360. But let me know what you guys think about all this down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.